Welcome back. This is Newfoundland and Labrador Studies 2205, Unit 2, The Roots of Our Culture, Section 6, Lesson 1, Video 2, on the efforts and issues with governance of the representative government. So first, let's start with their efforts. The actions of representative government had little influence on the everyday lives of its citizens. Until the Colonial Building was built in 1850, they didn't even have a home and met in rented or borrowed rooms. The main expenses were the legislature's expenses, courts and jails, upkeep of public buildings, and relief for the poor. A small amount was spent on roads and bridges, and acts were passed to build lighthouses along the coast. This was the first time actions of improvement were made by the government. Health and education services were largely left in the hands of churches, and not run by the government until the 20th century. There were no taxes at the time, and money came from customs import duties. The whole of the civil service consisted of a few dozen men in St. John's, and some outport magistrates, remember their justice of the peace, with the government employing around 100 people in total. These two images here are of courthouses in what was considered then outports. The top in Curling, you can see the harbour behind it, which is right next to Corner Brook. And then this bottom one here is in Trinity. But of course there were problems. The idea of representative government was that the two houses would serve as a system of checks and balances. This worked in theory, but not so much in practice. Elected assembly members ultimately wanted more power, thinking they were the real government elected by the people. Members of the appointed upper house feared mob rule and resisted any loss of power and frequently blocked measures that may hurt their interests. There was often division between the upper and lower house, as many citizens had little formal education and were considered unsuitable for government office. Additionally, merchants with a formal education often went back to Britain, so they weren't even there throughout the year to contribute in any way. Religion, ethnicity, and class were factors important in politics as well, and British legislation was hostile to the civil and political rights of Irish and French Roman Catholics. Members of the upper house were often members of the Church of England, while the lower house also had Roman Catholics and Methodists. The upper house was often accused of patronage, meaning making decisions that favored people associated with the Church of England. And, of course, Indigenous people and women did not even have a seat at the table in terms of government representation. The election process was also problematic, as there was no secret ballot. This provided opportunities for violence and intimidation. On several occasions, troops had to intervene during elections. But there were attempts to improve governance, and between 1842 and 1848, the Colonial Office attempted an experiment by merging the upper and lower house into an amalgamated assembly. The two groups had to work together, but it did not join them together in a common cause. This provided a brief break in the political fighting, and Governor John Harvey was a positive influence, and the approach worked during his term. That's the man here in the drawing on the right. When Governor Harvey finished his appointment as governor, conflict emerged again. Around this time, a solution was being drafted, though. That solution was responsible government, which we'll talk about in the next lesson. So now it's time to review. I'm going to ask you to complete the activities I have for you in Brightspace. I hope you have a good day.